It's really an honor for me to be up here with these gentlemen because they are, in some sense, my heroes. We live in a century which will probably be, well, this is bound to be a special century. I think every century thought it was a special century. If we're here in the year 1013, we've got jousting, we've got the Black Plague. It's a special century. But this century, we'll see, we're finally understanding biology. We may be inventing our successors, but something that we've already done so early in this century. Imagine this project. This is more than a driverless car. This is more than a robot that can carry you out of a burning building. Taking something the size of a small car, very complicated device, and sending it up to a place that's at least 35 million miles away on a good day. And it's never a good day up there. The weather up there is worse than Antarctica. Interacting with that thing every day. This is something that would have astounded every one of the 10,000 generations of Homo sapiens that have lived before you. And these guys have done it. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves because only you could do justice to that. Jim, why don't you tell
Okay, my name is Jim Erickson, and I'm here representing a huge team that is composed of both scientists, engineers, financial accountants, a few others. And they've done a great job, and they've done it as a team, and they get to do it every day and get it right every day. And there's no alternative to getting it right. So this is Dave Blake.
Well, my name's Dave Blake, and I'm the principal investigator of the Chemin instrument on Mars Science Laboratory. And my mea culpa is I'm not an engineer. The good news is I know guys like Jim.
All right, listen, I want to talk a little bit about the teamwork because that's what the award is about. But before we run out of time, I also want to talk a little bit about the science and how it would change, what it would mean to you, the car buyer. You talk about a big team, Jim. How big is the team?
Well, in one sense, you can measure it by, we've got about 150 people working every day. We've got 450 scientists that somehow come together and figure out what they want to do that day. And we had thousands of people building the parts of the product that we put together and put on Mars.
How long have you been at this?
At the space program, I've been at it for 40 years.
No, I mean this.
For MSL, believe it or not, I was involved for about 6 years, strictly on a review board. And then they suddenly said, okay, we've got something new for you to do. I want you to take over the project. And so 2 months after launch, I came over. 2 months after landing, I came over and began integrating into the team.
Maybe I'll direct this to Dave. I think nature has made it easy for small groups to work well together, small teams like basketball teams or squads in the Army. This applies to men at least. If you get a lot of men together, they march across the landscape and wreak havoc and destruction. This is a big group of men. And so how did you keep things from fragmenting? I mean, they're all working on parallel projects. How did you keep the whole thing moving?
Well, I'm a scientist, and the issue is if you see something shiny, you want to go look at it, And so I'm probably not the one to ask, but I can describe what the structure, part of the structure that was created to make this happen. And literally, we have to work on Mars's time, right? The rover works during the day and goes to sleep at night. It's too cold to work. We'd have to heat all the joints to even make it move. So we have a time period to do everything. So I hope I can pass this over to Jim because he's one of the guys who designed this. But basically, the data come down, you start work, you have 12 hours for 400 scientists to come up with a plan, put it into some kind of coding, deliver it to a whole bunch of groups that go through and they hash out the energy budget, the data budget, the downlink times, the temperature, where the sun is, and they come up with a series of commands that then are reviewed by JPL engineers ad infinitum, command by command, every night. And if they don't get this thing uplinked to the rover on time, we lose the day. So it's punctuality is not even the word for it.
Can I follow up a little bit, maybe with you, Jim? But for the audience that doesn't recognize the fact that Mars has a different day length than Earth, but it's close. It's like, what, 20 minutes longer, 40 minutes longer. 40 minutes longer. So you begin work every day 40 minutes later? Aren't you in a permanent state of jet lag?
We did that for the first 90 days, and the answer was yes. You're sitting there, and pretty soon you notice, oh, the sun's coming up, and it's my bedtime. that gets people a little groggy, and we had all kinds of sleep researchers that both helped us get ready for first on the MER project, Mars exploration rovers, and then on this one. But also, then they studied us because it was a wonderful laboratory for them. We paid them, but somehow when they were studying us, we didn't get paid for this.
Yeah, you did.
But I'd like to do one little note. Dave glossed over the fact that these 400 scientists are going to come up with the desire for what the next day is going to be. And they've got only a short period of that 12 hours that rotates through the day and to do that. And can you imagine getting 400 scientists together on what shiny object they want to pick up and look at? I do not know how they do that. They do it very well. And I think it has something to do with Samuel Johnson's saying, if we don't get the commands all together, we lose the whole day, and nobody gets a shiny object. So.
You make it sound easy, and this jet lag kind of intrigues me, that they turned you into lab rats. Did they give you melatonin or something like that? Having done that, I mean, what about the fact that you have this delay? You want the rover to do something. You want it to go over there. You see a shiny object, and you want it to go there. But of course, you send a command, and it takes 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, to get there. And then it goes over there, and maybe it bumps against something. I mean, you can't just look out the front of this thing with a camera and say, I want to go over there, and then gun the engine and go, right? Can you do that?
Nope. The option really is you figure out what you want the vehicle to do the next day, and you got to make the vehicle smart enough to deal with the things that are going to come up. You say, drive over there. Well, there's a rock in the way. Is it going to go around it? Is it going to stop and wait for help from home? You get to make those decisions, and the question is, do you think that the smarts you put on the vehicle, the software you've designed, the robotics, is it good enough to handle that particular challenge? Or is it scary enough that you say, if it runs into that, stop and we'll figure it out? But if you get there, then we want you to put the instruments on that rock. And when it all comes together and you get the results back and the vehicle did what you want, you get about 30 seconds to say, oh, God, thank you. And then you're on the next day.
Yep. I'd like to remind people that going to Mars, I mean, it's not easy, it's not cheap, it's not simple, but it's also almost never successful. At least that was the case up until fairly recently. Okay, so people know about the 7 minutes of terror where this thing is coming down, but I can hardly imagine that there haven't been additional minutes of terror since. Dave, can you tell me about some of the unexpected things that look like they might have been showstoppers, if there were any?
Well, the whole thing kind of looked like a showstopper when we started, and when I say we, it's not me, it's a lot of JPL engineers. And I think something that people don't realize about this landing is it was done for a reason. And when the Merlanders landed, they have something called the landing ellipse, and that's the area where the thing would land with air added to it. And that ellipse was over 100 kilometers in diameter, 100 kilometers. That's the diameter of the whole of Gale Crater. Now, this landing system that was devised by JPL, these engineers, it landed in an area that was 20 kilometers long by 6 kilometers wide. And I had my project engineer at JPL, because my instrument was built there, he saw the landing. He came up to me afterwards and he said, they missed the mark by 2 kilometers. And people don't realize how amazing that is, aside from what it looks like, the doing of it. And personally, I can say this because I'm not from JPL, I'm from Ames Research Center. There's a national treasure of engineers down there, generations of engineers who make this possible.
Let's talk a little bit about the science. The rover, Curiosity, is now climbing this hill, climbing this mountain really, Mount Sharp. It's doing this not to plant a flag at the top. There's kind of a layer cake of sedimentary rock. What's the interest? Why make it so challenging for this thing?
Well, the thing, I mean, if you think about the 9 years that the MER rovers have been going around, the one now going around the surface, it has seen about 10 meters of sediment looking into craters. Mount Sharp is 5,000 meters of sediment, and this is not the central crater of from the moon, which is just thrown up material from the impact. This is sedimentary rock. This Gale crater was filled with sedimentary material, and then excavated by the wind. And so this 5,000 meters of sediment has at least 1 billion years of Mars history tied up into it, layer by layer, and we can read it like a book.
So the idea is to learn the history of Mars, but there's a
Yes.
reason to learn the history of Mars. I mean, it's not just to fill Martian textbooks.
Okay. Well, I don't. We're learning about Mars because in doing that we will learn about the Earth, because the Earth has tectonic plates. If you wanted to look for 3.5 or 4 billion-year-old rocks on Earth, it would comprise 1% of the surface, and it would have been heated to the point where you couldn't even tell what kind of a rock it was. Mars never saw plate tectonics, and so if we want to look at the very early part of Mars history, at the same time when Mars was wet and warm like the Earth was, the same time that life originated on the Earth, we look to Mars, because that's where we're going to find it. We're not going to find it on the Earth. There are no rocks there to look at of that age.
The one word you haven't used, either one of you, is, I don't have to tell you, life, right? Okay, and I'm sort of curious why it is that actually Curiosity doesn't have any experiments on board to look directly for biology, microbial biology, that might still be extant underneath the rusty, dusty surface of our little ruddy buddy up there. And why is that? Why don't you just, because that would be the big win. I think everybody's interested in, I'm sure 90% of this audience is interested in the hydrology of Mars. Okay, I don't doubt that. But what they really want to know about is the biology on Mars. Why don't you just look for life directly?
Well, let me jump in on that one. From personal history, on Viking, back in 1976, that was the plan. Go for the home run. Identify whether life was there now. They had the label release experiment, the results from that, and when they looked at it, they realized we can't tell from what we sent it to Mars. We found very active chemistry. It could be the chemistry, it could be the life. We don't actually know how to tell whether there's life there or not. So that sort of made us a little more humble. And now we're trying to do the stepping stones that say, is there a possibility that there's life there as we know it? Throw in that caveat as well. And what would you have to find in order to say the conditions were there in the beginning to have life? Maybe there wasn't, but were the conditions right there first? And then once you find that, you say, okay, these are the areas where there might have been the conditions for life. And a further criteria later is, and would still be preserved over the billion years or so where that might happen. And then the next steps later on are going to be to try and get to the other question with the 4-letter word that nobody mentions.
Okay, so, I mean, you guys are interested in life. I don't doubt that. You're saying, Jim, step by step is the way to do it. We tried the home run. It didn't work. The problem with the home run is it requires that you land in the right spot, find it out. Now you can determine where the right spot to look for hints of biology either existing now or maybe 4 billion years ago when Mars was a kinder, gentler planet, to quote one of our presidents. Is that the deal?
That's the deal. And it may be a little more frustrating to wait, but I think this is the path to get it right. We'll know the answer when we're done.
Just a technical thing. How far up that mountain does the Mars Science Laboratory, the rover, how far does it go per day typically?
Oh, per day?
Per day.
Well, I should
Maybe per
preface,
hour.
I should preface this. We landed, and we went, as scientists do, we went the opposite direction, a kilometer from where we're supposed to go, mainly because there were some shiny rocks in that direction. And we found a habitable environment. It was the first time ever, and so there was good reason to do this. We followed our intuition. We followed the orbital imagery, and we went to the sweet spot, and we found what we wanted to find. Now we have to backtrack we have to go 8 kilometers to get to even the entry to Mount Sharp. So we're going to spend the next year trekking along 80 to 100 meters a day, hopefully more if Jim and his friends can beef it up a bit. And
no pressure.
And we're going to do some sampling along the way, but we will be at the base of Mount Sharp probably next year at this time. But the good news is our our observational period of the lifetime for our mission is 2 years, but it'll go on if we're still alive. And we had a little meeting with all the PIs, and we discovered that there's nothing on the rover that's going to quit at least before a decade. So we've got at least a decade to move forward. So we'll move on up, and we'll go as far as we can.
All right, well, we've run out of time. Just a simple observation. In 5,000 years, when people look back on the 21st century, right, it isn't the wars or even the social media or the reality television that they're going to remember. What they're going to remember is what you guys are doing. These are the first steps out of the crib. I think you guys really nailed it.
Thank you.
Jim.
Great job, Seth. That's